Welcome to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Klein, co-founder and CEO, along with my husband and company visionary, Devin Klein.
And together, with our amazing team, we are going to help you push past your limits, not just physically in our gyms, but right here, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually on the Burn Bootcamp podcast.
Together, we will take on challenges and break through barriers to transform into the best possible version of ourselves. We are more than a gym. We are a community. Your community.
Let's go, Burn Nation. All right, Burn Nation, welcome back to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. We are here with a special guest today, Ashley LeMieux. I'm so excited to have you today. Not only a grief expert, but a Burn Bootcamp member and a bachelor's in English and master's in science with an emphasis in grief from Arizona State University. You have your own incredible story that I cannot wait to dive into. You wrote a book called Born to Shine that was a Publishers Weekly bestseller, and that really launched your authoring career. And you've also written a follow-up called I Am Here. She's the founder and CEO of the Shine Project, which is an online community and shop to help women get through difficult times in their lives. Based on her own experience, she really bases her books and all of her workings. She's also been featured on a lot of things you may have seen before: Health.com, Entrepreneur, Cafe Mom, New York Post, Daily Mail. I'm sure there's so many more because the book was so successful. But she's not done there. She's the creator and the co-host of a wellness podcast, which I'm excited. Morgan and I are going to join her on Healing Her podcast, where she uses her own personal journey and education to take a deep dive into the world of grief and healing in a way that's relatable to her audience. And there's no more relatable person to our audience than a Burn Bootcamp member who is here to really take us on a journey through grief. We all go through it, through suffering. I'm so interested in this topic. I have so many questions for you. You have an amazing story. You, your husband, Mike, and your beautiful daughter have shared this story. You share this story together, obviously, and you also, you're back and forth in the summers to Winston-Salem, right? You come join the Winston-Salem gym every now and then, or what?
Yeah, it's so much fun to have Burn Bootcamp fam here also.
Yeah. So it's East and West Coast, desert to the mountains. So let's start this, you guys. As I begin to read her first book, which released in 2019, Born to Shine, I just want to compliment you on how well written it is. And you can tell the story about how many times people told you no before they finally told you yes. That's a whole nother thread we're going to pull on today. But I want to read apart from her introduction that I think it will take us right into Ashley's story and her teachings so beautifully. And this is from March 5th, 2017 in her book. She quotes, "Today I deflated. I gave up. How in the world could a human possibly feel so incapable of doing something so good and still expect to take another step forward? I had given it my all and was sure it was going to work out, but it didn't. What a total failure I was. What a waste. This is how they feel, the people who stop dreaming, who get stuck, who lose faith in themselves and each other and God. What do I do now? What do I give when I have nothing left inside of me? This is how they feel. I'm not supposed to feel this way. They are." And then she begins the first chapter in the intro by saying, "There is no they, there's only us. All of us, all 7.4 billion inhabitants of planet Earth, suffer. But why does our unique and personal pain always feel so isolating? Why, in our sorrow, does it feel impossible to breathe when all around us people seem to be thriving in the midst of their own struggles?" Some interesting questions that you pose to the audience right off the bat, and they seem very deeply personal to you. You can feel your heart. You can feel the amount of time that you took just in the first few sentences there. So how did you get to a place where you were asking these profound questions?
You know what's so interesting listening to you read that right now is I haven't read that chapter for several years, to be honest. And it's interesting thinking about that time in my life when I wrote this book and how different it feels from this season that I am in right now. And yet, when you read it, it's like I can be right back in the room where my loss occurred, where my grief felt like it was just burying me under. And sometimes I still have, because that's how grief works, right? Sometimes I still have these moments where I'm going along with my day and I'll have this memory, or I'll hear a song, or a holiday or an important date is coming up that brings me back to this exact moment in time that you just read, that opened up all of these questions to me of how does a human possibly keep moving forward when everything that you were hoping for feels like was taken away from you? And that's where I found myself in this moment. Really quick part of my story is that we were guardians to two kiddos. We raised them for over half their lives, and then we unexpectedly lost them in a very unexpected contested adoption. And I think, what connects us as humans is that even though the details of our lives, of our stories, those are different, the emotions that we all share connects us as part of the human experience. So even though the details of my story are going to be different than yours or you who are listening, it's the feelings that we share that help us be able to move through things and understand each other. And so this was one of the first times in my life where I experienced a significant loss to the point that I didn't understand anymore who I was, what life was all about, if I had the capacity to keep going, if I wanted to keep going. And I had to sit with some really dark and deep and hard questions that were either going to propel me forward and keep me going, or lead to me spiraling like I was. And this was kind of that moment that you just read.
And so in the book, obviously, out of privacy for the children, S&Z is the name in the book. And so can you just dive in a little bit deeper in 2013, kind of set up this moment for us, because this really kickstarts, not to bring you back into it necessarily, but I think part of the teaching to other people is to recall that emotion and really help, like you said, it helps them feel whatever storyline that they're feeling and helps them work backwards and identify the significant emotional experiences in the past. So you have become a guardian overnight, basically, in 2013. And these are you and your husband. You're like, these are our kids. Like, we are taking care of them. You had the long-term expectation that you're going to raise these children, right?
Yeah, we all did.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so the kids included. And
Correct.
How old were they at the time?
When we first met them, they were 3 and 5.
Okay.
So they had been with us for many, many years at this point.
Right. Okay. And then so they're in the stage of life where they're beginning to start to connect the dots and what's going on. So out of nowhere, an unexpected battle for adoption comes about, and the kids are at the center of it. And how long did that about go on for? Because obviously that part, was very tough.
We're all living in this limbo of almost 2 years.
Okay.
So it was this long, unknown, middle, messy part that we had hope during it that things were going to be okay, but we just didn't know.
Well, that's, I think, such an interesting thing, because 2 years of the unknown, isn't that where most of the suffering would occur then? Because the unknown is it's somehow linked to the uncertainty of the future. And I know in my own life, whenever there's an unknown, or whenever I'm in whatever people want to language it, like in limbo, or I'm uncertain of the future, you have this a certain level of suffering depending on what you're experiencing. Was this the time where you felt that most? And am I tracking?
Yeah, I don't know if it's that I felt it most, but I think that this is the moment in most of our lives where people often use the phrase, I feel stuck in my life. Mm-hmm. I feel stuck. I don't know what path to take next. And that's definitely where I found myself. We were stuck in this anxiety and this unknown future where truly we didn't know what path to take forward. We didn't have a lot of options even. at that point. And so living in that limbo, in the fear, in the anxiety, in that suffering, that's when for me a lot of the grief started manifesting physically also. So I became very, very sick. I was having to go to a lot of doctor's appointments. We were trying to figure out what was wrong with my gut. And I was getting, like colonoscopies and like all these things trying to figure out what was wrong with me. But in the reality of it, it was that the stress and the deep trauma that all of us were going through, which, as we're talking about, the suffering was manifesting physically. And when you don't know a path forward, it's really, really hard to get your grief, your suffering moving somewhere. And this is one of those places that so many people reach or find themselves in, and they just feel stuck. And then that stuckness keeps festering for years to come because they just don't know what to do.
What gets you out of the stuckness?
That's such a good question.
Like, what is the initial momentum? I know it's a series of things, right? Let's be practical. There's not one magical moment that happens and, I'm suffering, and all of a sudden I'm not suffering anymore. Largely as, a buildup of momentum over time. If you zoom yourself back into your own story, what was the initial momentum? What belief changed? What perspective changed? What new insight did you gain that, how did it start?
So I'll fast forward now a couple of years. We lost the kids. We ended up moving from Phoenix to Nashville. We sold all of our belongings. We rented out our home in Phoenix. We just had to go figure out what life was going to look like for us now. I had to find myself again because who I was before, she was no longer, and there was no going back to her because I knew new things now. And that was the first step for me, was understanding that life was never going to be how it once was. I think a lot of times we start running ourselves in circles because we want to fit back to how things were. And of course we do, right? Like, that was our life. That was what we loved. That was who we were. And we hold on and we white knuckle to not wanting to lose those things. But I had to first start understanding that it was okay for me and my life to become different, and that entered its own grief. But I'm going to tell you, the most unsexiest thing about this question of, okay, what is this first step? And the reality is, 90% of people never reach this first step. How it happened for me was I was sitting on my floor getting ready one morning, and I was about to go meet a literary agent in Nashville for lunch. And I was sitting there and I just started sobbing. Again, the physical part of me that was just exhausted, tired, sick, the emotional part, the grief, it all was so heavy. I just started sobbing. I was trying to get myself together for this very big meeting that I was having. And I remember I put my curling iron down and I looked at myself in the mirror. And for the very first time, I really, really leaned in and acknowledged my grief. And I said, grief, what is it that you are wanting to teach me right now? Which brings us to the first thing that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, is we have to get to a place where we can acknowledge where we actually are. Without doing that, we will spend our whole life running in circles on this hamster wheel, wondering why we feel like we're not moving anywhere, right? We can start the company, we can make the money, we can travel, we can move, we can get into a new relationship, we can do all of these things that we thought we ever wanted, and we can reach them and get there and still feel like, I thought I would feel different now. I have everything I thought I wanted, but why do I still feel this emptiness or this void or this feeling inside that this just isn't enough? I thought I would feel different. And so much of that has to do with us not acknowledging where we actually are, what we actually are feeling, and then allowing ourselves to enter this healing journey where we start addressing these deep wounds and feelings that allow us to heal in a way where we can move forward and get unstuck.
So acknowledgement is step one, right?
Yeah.
And then feeling how am I feeling? How do I want to feel? Really being aware of your emotions. Emotional intelligence has a lot to do with this. It seems. Are you familiar with the scale of consciousness from enlightenment to guilt and to shame?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what doctor did that?
I can't remember.
A map, Jordan, map of consciousness, Dr. Robert something or other. We'll pull it up so that you guys can see this map of consciousness. But what it does is it shows you, yes, that one right there on the left. Yes. It shows you David Hawkins, Dr. David Hawkins. That's who it was. Okay. So it shows you from enlightenment to shame or to guilt. And knowing, most people understand like the big 5 emotions. What is it? Happy, sad, angry, depressed, disgusted. Like those are like the big 5 emotions, and most people navigate the world through only those 5. What emotional intelligence is my favorite tool for it is being able to identify like the subset, the derivations of each of those emotions. So like, happiness has even a more elevated emotion called joy, and joy has an even more of an elevated emotion called enlightenment. And the same thing goes with sadness, goes to grief, and then despair, and then depression, shame, guilt, all of it cascades down. So you're saying, just so I'm clear, we need to become more emotionally intelligent if we want to get some momentum at all to begin with, because if we don't know what the problem is and we can't pinpoint it with language, then it's really hard to describe it, to be able to communicate to yourself and to others, what the problem is. Therefore, you can try to find an answer. Is that?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. But not only do we need to be able to describe it, most of us won't allow ourselves to feel it. We won't even validate it to ourselves. If you can pull up the emotion wheel, the wheel of emotions, this is actually really cool, because I'll take anger, for example. A lot of times someone will get stuck in anger, but what they are really feeling is profound sadness. But you know what's easier to feel than just feeling sad and dealing with that? It's easier to feel angry. It's easier to be mad at somebody, to place blame on somebody, to express that type of outward emotion than to sit with your sadness and be able to sift through that. And so that's where acknowledgement comes in, is we got to figure out how can we feel safe to feel our emotions so that we can feel them, and then we can describe what's going on so we can move forward.
And is safety part of like the environment change for you?
Safety the environment change was a huge one.
Phoenix to Nashville, right? Was that part of that safety protocol?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The situation was over. A lot of times people don't feel safe expressing their emotions because it goes back to childhood. And if you weren't given a safe space where you were allowed to express how you were feeling as a child, it's really difficult to learn how to do that as an adult, because you will revert back. Okay, yeah, so this is the feelings wheel. So if you look at angry, and angry in the way where it's easy to just be like, I'm just mad. But really, if you go to the outer ring of this emotion wheel, maybe you're feeling other things. Maybe you are numb. Numbness is a really big one that masks as anger.
Skeptical, dismissive, betrayed, resentful, disrespected, ridiculed, indignant, violated, furious, jealous. There's all these different derivations of the word angry.
Right.
Okay.
And at our healthiest, that's what we can identify with, but we have to do the work to be able to get there.
So it's not about diverting to one of the core emotions and not feeling anger or trying to stay away from anger, or, which I think is so interesting about suffering, it's not trying to avoid suffering, it's trying to be able to provide some type of meaning, some type of emotional, some type of emotional security in the suffering that is already there, right? Like that you're not running from it, but you're leaning into it in a sense.
And so you don't get stuck there. A lot of us also have this false perception of what healing is, because we've been taught wrong, because society just wants us to get over it, right? Move on, keep going. And so in our minds, we have this idea that healing means we don't feel the hard things anymore. But what healing actually is learning how to feel all of our emotions, including the hard things, so that we can make space to feel the good, happy, joyful things too. And that's what healing is. It's learning how to feel all of it so that none of it keeps burying us under.
So you were talking about basically like the blueprint of our lives. Like we as human beings, we have, some idea about how our life is supposed to turn out. We've architected this picture, this vision of the future for ourselves is another way to put it. And we kind of know every step along the way, or at least we visualize every step along the way as if it's like a blueprint. And so what you're saying is that there's a very powerful human need to be able to align to who you think that you are and who you think that you're going to be. And as soon as that blueprint is rendered like no longer valid, meaning like I was a baseball player and my dream was to go to the MLB. I thought about nothing. That was my only plan A. I had no plan B or C. And when I got released, my entire world shattered momentarily. Right, like my blueprint basically blew up. It was rendered useless at that point. And so people go through this in other areas of their lives, and they experience the same thing. Where I thought I was going to be on this path. Oh wait, there's an obstacle. One that I'm not going to get around this. Like there was no way I was going to go be a Cy Young Award winner in the major leagues. I just wasn't talented enough. I was good enough to be where I got to, but I wasn't good enough for the next level. And that's crushing for a lot of people. Like to even admit that, like, it's usually like, oh, the team was, they didn't set me up the right way, or the environment or my college or whatever. But most people will stay right there, and I see it all the time in baseball. It's the furthest along they got in their blueprint, so they're going to stay right there, and they're going to dwell, right? And they're going to dwell, and they're going to stay and not find any meaning in the suffering, not take any accountability for it, and just be that dude at the bar on Wednesday who still has his college varsity jacket on, who talks about his days in the minor leagues when he's 60 and still living in that moment. And you're saying that if you don't become more emotionally intelligent, you're going to, at some point, your plans are going to be altered. And if you're not willing to then alter your plans when they're forced to alter, then you're going to be in suffering in a negative way, and you're just going to dwell. And that's the place that we see depression at, or something like that.
Yeah, well, you just said something really interesting. And it's this point you're talking about where we have to make this shift, but we don't, because that's what we wanted it to be, and that's what we're going to hold on to. That's when a lot of people start losing what their purpose is. Okay. So how many times have you met people or talked to people, or even yourself, in that period when you were transitioning from baseball player, this is my identity, this is what I identify with, this is what I'm going to do, to then figuring out, what am I going to do? What am I pursuing? How am I spending my time? Where am I using my talents? Who am I outside of this role that I have played my entire life, right? We start then questioning, what is my purpose? And without purpose, it becomes so hard to know how to move next. And if we've only wrapped up our purpose into this one thing without allowing it to be anything else, then we get stuck.
One of the quotes, I like to read philosophy. That's what I do from like 10 p.m. to like midnight every night.
After burn hours.
It's either research our next interview, study for the the latest news in health and fitness, or just read some endless philosophy. I like it because it just goes in circles over and over and over. But it's interesting to hear different perspectives philosophically, and one that, as we talk about suffering here today, and there's like that negativity, that taboo with that word. People try to run from it rather than lean into it. I was doing some philosophizing last night, and there's a Friedrich Nietzsche quote that I came across that said, "To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." And that's essentially what you're saying is that the passion that you lose when you're in this state of dwelling, that passion that you lose is in the absence of the meaning in the suffering itself.
Yeah.
Something like that?
Something like that. But can I tell you what I believe about meaning?
Yeah.
Because there's a few phrases that I really hate that we say to make people feel better.
Okay.
One of those things is everything happens for a reason. And
You think that's BS?
I think it's BS.
Okay.
I don't believe everything happens for a reason. I believe things happen because life is hard and things out of our control happen. And I don't believe that there is meaning in everything. What I believe, especially in the grieving process, is that we get to a point where we choose what meaning to assign to what has happened to us. That is, for me, how I was able to start moving from suffering and out of it into living with grief that was allowing me to move forward. And I was carrying it with me, but it wasn't the main focus anymore of my entire life.
Well, I love what you say about that from this perspective, although we could talk back and forth about steel manning and straw manning, either side of this, but I know what you're saying. It's that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but because I want to get this clear, I think it's very important, is that everything happens for a reason, or that belief system is more like a cause and effect belief system that really takes the controller out of your hands as an operator, right? Like, if everything happens for a reason, that means fate is at play. That means what happens to me has some inherent, mystic chain of cause and event that I don't really have any control over. And you're saying that's not a very empowering way to look at things, because what good would it do for me to find meaning in suffering if it doesn't matter anyway, if I'm just going to inevitably suffer? As opposed to what you're saying is there isn't any inherent meaning in everything, but it's your decision and perspective on the experience, the meaning that you make the decision to then place on it, that actually matters. And that's keeping the controller in your hand. Is that a correct way to look at what you're saying?
Totally. That's how you get your power back from your grief. I'll give you an example, if that's okay.
Please.
A few years after we lost the older two kids, I was pregnant with our first biological baby, and we had a late pregnancy loss, and I went septic, and it was a lot. So during that time, people would often tell me, well, Ashley, everything happens for a reason, right? Everything happens for a reason. You'll find the reason soon. You'll understand why this has happened. And I would just look at them and I would be like, there's no reason why we just lost our baby boy. There's no greater purpose or reason for that. In order for me to create meaning from that experience, it would be something that I would have to choose to do down the road. Over the years, as I've worked with millions of women in their grief, what I have learned is that when we are in that acute suffering, grieving stage, telling someone that their pain right now, that it is the worst thing they have ever experienced, is happening for a reason, is one of the most harmful, deflating things that we could ever tell somebody.
It reminds me of this video. Let's see if we can pull it up. It's the Brene Brown empathy video. Try to find it on YouTube.
Yeah, this is a good one.
If you can't, then that's okay. Okay, apparently we can't hear it. Okay, well, we're going to fix that, right? We're going to hear it. We're going to hear it next time, okay? Well, I want you guys we'll put the link in the show notes. It's a very good video. You've seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it reminds me of what you were talking about, where she really describes, sympathy versus empathy. And sympathy is, everything happens for a reason, you're okay. At least you're successful in X, Y, and Z category, right, versus like, hey, I feel you, I'm with you. Mm-hmm. I don't have all the answers to your problems, nor do I pretend to, but I will be here when you need a shoulder to cry on, and I'll do that with you.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to solve all your problems. This is a big problem in business, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Huge problem.
Yes.
There is zero empathy in business, like at a grand scale, right? We really pride ourselves on leaning into that. We call it people first, just to make it easy to understand system-wide. But and you probably feel this being a member too, right? Like there's a real genuine concern and care, yes, for our members, mm-hmm, and it's not just like, hey, we hope you hey, I'm not feeling great today. Well, at least you got your workout in. I'm glad you're here. It's like, no, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
We're here for you, though.
Yes.
And we pick. Have you seen anything, little sidetrack note real quick. Have you seen anything at Awatuki that leans into that example of the community picking somebody up when, you know, someone gets married, someone gets divorced, somebody gets a new job, somebody hits 250 camps, somebody overcomes a cancer diagnosis or has a cancer diagnosis. Have you been a part of any of those kind of group, collective, empathetic tendencies of Burn Nation at all?
Oh my gosh, just even going there every day with like our head trainer there, the whole staff there, is anytime anyone has accomplished something, it is this whole celebration. I remember over the summer I was gone a little bit and I'm getting text messages from Stephanie who's like, hey, are you okay? Haven't seen you this week. Where you at? And I'm like, oh, I'm actually at the Winston-Salem burn. I'm good. But
here's my picture to prove it.
I promise I'm here.
Yeah.
But just that genuine care is what was really helpful for me actually stepping back into a gym after, you know, some experiences that I've had the past few years, and it was what has kept me going there for sure.
This is I'm gonna go to one more quote that you have here. Let me see. I wrote it down. I'll find it in a second. As I search for this quote, it's profound. I wanted to read it. Could you talk to me just about this whole notion of getting your power back? What does it mean when you say give it away? How do we give it away in context of grief? How do we keep it? Is it just the perspective of there isn't any inherent meaning in everything? It's the meaning I give it. Is that real? What gives? I know that's part of the story, but I notice myself, and I'd love to hear comments on this myself. Sometimes and this is mostly with Morgan, part of the power that I give away is to seek other people's approval.
Yes.
To not cause any, it's not grief, it wouldn't be grief, but it'd be some, lighter version of that.
It's like a coping mechanism probably.
Yeah. Like I seek certain people's approval, my franchise partners. And it's not like it's them. I inherently want to make them happy.
Right.
Like that's my goal. I want to make sure that they are healthy, that they're happy, that they're financially well because they're in business with me, that they're happy with the investment that they made. And sometimes I'll have a tendency to feel anxious if I feel like I'm letting them down at all, when I very well know that the decisions that I've made are ones with integrity and authenticity and the core values at the forefront. It wasn't a decision that I felt bad about. It was the way that the decision might affect other people and then their perspective of me back, even though I don't think I would make a different decision.
Do you ever find yourself trying to control their perception of you?
I think,
or to find yourself doing things to fix the perception of you?
I would say yes. I would not see a world in which somebody in my position couldn't manage the reputation of yourself and the people that you serve.
Yes.
Yeah, in some way.
Okay, I love that you have brought this up because this is such a universal feeling, whether it's you want other people's approval or whether you want a certain situation to go your way or whether you've had a hard thing in the past and you want to ensure that moving forward it's not going to blow up in your face again. As humans, we tell ourselves that we have control over the bigger things going on around us. And that's one of the ways, like you just brought up, that we really give our power away trying to be able to control the outcomes that we have no control over. And for me, because I'm the same as you, eldest daughter, any eldest daughters listening, you're just like, everything had to be perfect all the time. High achiever. People's opinions and approval of me have really mattered my whole life, and trying to control their perception of me so that I could prove that I'm right or that I'm a certain way. Something, I don't know if this might be something that you can hold on to, but there's a thought that I play in my head over that I've kind of grasped onto, and it's that other people are allowed to be wrong about me. But anyway, sidetrack.
No, break that down.
Yeah. Other people are allowed to be wrong about me.
Okay. Yeah, break that down.
Meaning that other people are allowed to have their own thoughts and opinions and feelings on me, even if they're wrong. Even if to my core it's not true to who I know I am, they are allowed to be wrong about me. And once I realized that the world and other people, we are all operating from our lens of our own world, right? Like, you're the center of your world, I'm the center of my world, your franchise partners are the center of their worlds, and so we are all viewing each other and things that are happening through this lens of me being at the center. When we can stop trying to control other people's experience with us, oh my gosh, there's so much freedom in that. There's so much power that actually comes back to us, because we are now finally allowing ourselves to have the permission to be who we are, regardless of what other people think about it. And once we give ourselves the permission to do that, that's when we have the freedom to really, really impact the world in the way that only we can uniquely do.
Where does the need to get the permission come from? Do you think that's something like epigenetically baked in, or is that parental advisory as you're growing up? You know, where do I develop? Is it inherent in all human beings? Do we develop this need, this quest for permission from those that we respect, because that's a signal in society that, you know, hey, this is going to keep you safe. This is the right way to do things. Like, where does that permission come from? And is it actually useful to have that, or is that something that we've installed, that isn't so useful?
Well, everyone I have worked with and who I have ever met always has this underlying fear. That is this question of, am I good enough? Am I good enough to do this thing? Am I good enough in my job? Am I good enough as a mom, as a wife, whatever that thing is? And oftentimes we flip and we do things trying to be good enough for whatever person we are trying to please, right? The partner, whoever's in your home unit, your boss, employees, whoever it is. And as we do that, as we try to become enough for them, wanting to be good enough for them, we start losing parts of ourselves that we don't give our own selves permission to be. A lot of times I think, depending on how you grow up, for sure that impacts you. For sure that impacts what you feel like you are allowed, who you are allowed to be, what's acceptable, what society might think of you, what the approval of your parents might be from that. Of course, that plays into it. But so many humans have this question of, am I good enough? And then we constantly try to prove that we are.
So the permission stems from some inherent motivation that we all have baked in that seems like leads back to love, some type of loss or gain of love. And I do things out of the loss or the need to gain or the need to keep the love of other people in my life. So the permission, in a sense, is making sure those that I cared for dearly care for me back as dearly as I care for them. So how do we get away from that? Because that's not going to go anywhere. That human need for us to need love, right, and to have a close circle. How do you navigate not letting that close circle that you need, that is part of our health, right? You were saying earlier, if your thoughts can make you sick, grief can make you sick.
Oh yeah.
Right? It can make you sick. You are physically sick. You're physically ill. So if it can make you sick, a thought, an emotion, then emotions or thoughts can also probably make you healthy, can make you happier, can keep your immune system higher, whatever the pathology is from that. When we're talking about this love, like, this is an intrinsic human need. Where is the balance? I know it's a gray area, and we're not going to have all the answers, but I'm interested to hear your opinion on what that gray area is between needing love as a part of human psychology to be happy versus needing other people's permission. How do we define those things separately?
This is such a good question. There's a psychologist. I wish I could remember his name. Frank Anderson. It's Frank Anderson. But he has a phrase that he says, and it goes like this: What is often hysterical is historical. So here's what that means. As we talk about that through the lens of giving, receiving love, wanting to be enough to get love from other people. Sometimes we repeat patterns throughout our lives, trying to fix patterns from the beginning of our lives. So there's many instances, many people who will continue to be in patterns of relationships where they are always trying to seek someone's love, and like that person is just barely available or just not quite available, and they can find themselves in a new relationship, whether it's a partner or a business relationship or friendships, where it just seems like this pattern is always coming. And Frank Anderson teaches and talks about how if it's hysterical, meaning this is a problem that's always happening, that's always affecting you, that you're always trying to seek love from someone who's just like kind of always withholding, then that means it's probably historical, meaning it happened once from a long time ago, but the pattern hasn't been broken, and so it keeps coming up. There's this philosophy, this belief that patterns will continue to resurface in our lives until we heal from them. And so I guess that's kind of like my roundabout way of answering this question of how do we create healthy patterns in our lives so that we are giving and receiving love to people, to the community around us, where it goes both ways and we're not creating this hysterical experience for us because we are used to living in chaos and fear and shame and neglect. How can we heal that part of ourselves where, again, we feel safe enough to receive love that is whole and pure and does its best and is always going to show up for us no matter what?
Yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense. It's an interesting, very gray area to talk about because, you know, it is that double-edged sword of I need love, but it's like from who first? And, you know, we write about in our book Burn that Morgan and I co-authored, we talk about connecting with yourself before you can connect with others, right? And really, you know, realizing that at the end of the day, it's just you and yourself and God, whoever your God is, whatever your God is, right? That's it. And everything else is just a mere reflection of that.
Yes.
Right? And like my need, let me see if I can sort this out. My need for approval from others is filling a void of love that I don't have for myself, that they also don't have for me. Because if I really filled that void by first loving myself, I would realize that I don't need their little tiny bit of approval that they're barely available to give me, that I don't actually need that at all, that is not part of the love that I'm seeking. It's that I'm trying to fill this piece of my life in which I feel appreciated, respected, admired, and loved. And I'm not getting it from myself, and I'm not getting it from other people. And I'm only seeking it from other people because I don't have it in myself first. I'm not looking in the mirror and liking who I see is another way to put it.
Right. And also, I will say, again, like this gray area, I also am of this belief that sometimes we need other people to teach us and show us what true, genuine, real love is so that we can learn how to love ourselves too.
That's interesting. So then how are people who haven't found that happy? Because not everybody some people, I know, you know this too, right? They go through, what's the statistics on marriage? It's like half the marriages end up in, which is up, by the way, from like the peak in the 80s, or down, however, in a positive way. Less marriages, though. Less marriages, same divorce rate, less divorce rate. But then if you go second marriage, third marriage, it goes like 40 to 50%. And then 60, and then like 70%. These people aren't finding this. Like, How do you sort that out, or don't you believe that to be true, that, people, because in a sense, what I would push back and say is that, in a sense, that's needing somebody else's approval to then first love yourself. When you say, I need somebody to show me how. Like, what if parents don't show you how? Or what if your guardians don't show you how? You have to show yourself how.
Right.
Like, let's say there's nobody else around you. Like, you're just this kid that's left out on the streets by yourself, like willing to turn it around. So I have that conundrum with, right? Like, how does that work?
It's so hard. And I don't know if you've ever read studies on resilience, which are super interesting to me. But a lot of times this type of conversation can go back to resilience. And what makes me a little sad about it is that sometimes it is something that is inherently given to us, right? When I think about kids who are in the foster care system, we know the statistics in the foster care system. It's like many of those who are in prison were once in foster care, right? So it like goes back to this idea of when you're young, if you're not shown this consistent love, it creates problems. It creates hard times for you throughout the rest of your life. And I think that this conversation can kind of come from a privileged standpoint of, well, then how do we get you the help that you need, right? We know that therapy is important. We know that there's other deeper kinds of therapy like EMDR or intensive types of cognitive behavioral therapy that can help you, or if there's a mental illness that has come as a result of that, and medication. Like, I'm a huge advocate for all of those things so that the person can get the support they need. And sometimes that's what I want everyone to go to therapy. I'm like,
right.
Let's all go so we can figure our stuff out. But also I know that comes from a privileged place of not everyone has easy access or even knowledge to it. And I think that this is where, when we can heal ourselves, we then can start influencing the community, the people around us, to help give resources and advocate for people who don't have access to this type of information and help like they should.
We just did a really cool podcast on human resilience with Dr. Morgan Cutlip.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah, and she was just on not too long ago. That was a great episode. We really shine the flashlight on what it means to be resilient. I think you guys have like a Venn diagram crossover in terms of your interests when it comes to human resiliency. We are talking a lot about just like the effects of cold plunging, how there's not so much, peer-revised scientific medical journals out there that actually talk about the physiological effects and the recovery effects of cold plunging. But there are, in terms of mental resiliency and doing, essentially like making your brain do things that your brain doesn't want to do, like voluntarily, intentionally. That in itself, the outcome of that is more self-respect, right? It's more self-esteem. It's more self-love. It's an easy way, like even like taking a cold shower is an easy way to just make a quick promise to yourself on something that sucks that you don't want to do, and then just do it. And then that feeling of, I just did something I didn't want to do, something that was hard, it happens instantaneously. That's what keeps people coming back to burn too, is this, it's not the fact that we hit PRs and things like that. It's the confidence that is a byproduct of the PR.
Yes.
Right? It's that cascading emotion.
Yes. The self-esteem of it. For me, when I go to burn, I make a promise to myself every day. That's what I focus on, just one promise at a time to keep myself going. That's how I've gotten from where I was to where I am now. And with burn, that's how it started, was making this promise of, I'm going to show up for myself today in this way. And as I did that, and as I noticed the effects that it has on me emotionally, mentally, physically, I'm like, oh, this is a good promise for me to keep. And when I don't keep it, I notice the difference of it.
Well, isn't that where a lot of suffering takes place? In the broken promises that we make to ourselves over and over and over. And it's like 1,000 daily little knives that just keep slicing you over and over and over, causing this pain. And before you know it, you lose all confidence, because now you're a person that can't keep promises to themselves. And if I'm a person that can't keep promises to myself, well, then I don't love myself as much as I could. Therefore, other people don't love me as much as they could. How could they if I don't love myself first? And spiral and cascade and downward we go into this depression. And I'd like to hear your take on the kind of Western medicine philosophy versus a true cognitive behavioral therapeutics, natural working through your emotions, understanding your brain, understanding emotional intelligence. What does it mean versus, hey, you feel this way, here's a pill.
This is a good question, and I'm not a doctor or anyone's doctor, but for me, I'm a huge believer in both. Medication saved my life at one point, and then also learning how to work through my emotions and feel them and release them has also been a huge part of my journey. So I'm always an advocate to support yourself with as many tools as you need so that you can keep moving forward. Something that was really helpful for me in the beginning when my depression took over, that was brought on by grief and then prolonged grief, was someone explained it to me in this way. Actually, my psychiatrist explained it to me in this way because I was just like not getting off of this cycle of just feeling terrible all the time. And she said this: grief feels like a wave, like an ocean wave, where it comes in and man, you're like, I'm going to drown under this weight and in this water. But then there will be a moment where it goes back out, and then it will come back in, it'll go out, and it will kind of create this rhythm where you feel it, but then you'll get little moments of reprieve. And obviously in the beginning, the wave is going to be in way more than it goes out. But with depression, you feel like for an extended period of time, the wave comes in and it never goes back out. And when that happens, we know that you need more support, and medication is often a great way to help support it so that your brain can kind of get unstuck and start processing things the way that you want it to, so you can keep moving forward.
Yeah, medicine is an incredible thing when it's used appropriately and it's advised appropriately. And there's a lot of real lopsided, asymmetric talk nowadays in our country, especially, that's like, you have to be on this side or you have to be on this side. And that's with everything, politics, from medicine to food to fitness. Everything is polarized, and it's my team or your team. And it's almost never the case that it's always usually a mix, like in this case, of therapeutic work, like actually becoming more emotionally intelligent, doing the work to become, that's what I hear when I say psychiatry, is doing the work to become more emotionally intelligent so that I can then language to myself first the way things are that makes sense to me through my worldview, so that I can move forward in my life with forgiveness or whatever it might be. But you might have, like to your point, you need a little kickstart, right? I've never taken this type of medication or had the need to, but I can imagine a scenario in which that wave is like a surge in Southwest Florida after a hurricane, and it's just standing water. Yeah. And you need a little bit of momentum to take that surge out.
I think that, don't want to cut you off, but I also think that, if you were to break your arm right now, we would take you to the hospital, and we would know they would give you medication. You'd go under surgery. They'd put it back together. You'd have a protocol in which that you would follow so that your arm could heal again. And we know because of medicine that you could have full use of it again, right? We don't have this open conversation and dialogue or view on supporting our mental health. Our mental health is just as important as supporting our physical health. And so when we know that we are sick or off or there's a chemical imbalance, of course we want to go and get the same type of care and support as we would if we just broke one of our bones. And so that's also how I look at it. And I think these conversations are so important because it helps destigmatize the need to go and get help, and that it's okay.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, and you should get help if you break your arm, and if you got to like, not to be offensive, but if you have a piece of your brain that you feel like is metaphorically broken, then you should probably try to fix it. And you should use all the tools available to you. I think the problem that I see isn't so much in, generally speaking, people understanding the incredible nature of science and Western medicine, but it's the actual protocol. You know, and you might have a different experience than like mainstream, but the actual protocol sometimes is, hey, this and only this, here you go, take this and only this, and all your problems will be solved through this pill or through this protocol, right? And the protocol isn't, hey, I need you to jumpstart with this. I'm going to wean you off of this over time.
Absolutely.
Here's the protocol to then for you to take back control of your life, because relying fundamentally on medicine is relying on something else outside of you, generally speaking, right? Like there's obviously like outlier cases. I'm talking about the vast majority of cases, not the outlier cases where there's a severe genetic predisposition to anxiety or something like that. You know, like I'm talking about just every day, what most of us go through in life with, whether it's a family member dying or, you know, in your case, you losing 2 children who you thought you were going to raise them up your whole life. Or in my case, or so many people's cases, like their parents never being there for them. There's all types of different ways. And it's like, okay, well, here's the protocol. What is the protocol? I'm assuming based on your experience you had and your expertise too, you know, obviously you weren't going to be one of these people that would succumb to anybody saying, hey, no, this is the thing, and you should do this all the time. And I'm sure there are plenty of medical professionals whose protocol is spot on exactly what we should be doing. But just like everything else, my industry, everyone else's industry, there's a dark side of it and there's a light side of it, right? And I think the dark side of medicine is what gets demonized so much when, you know, you see the classic Netflix series where there's doctors hiring pretty blonde girls to then go sell them drugs and things like this. And it's like, you know, that gets then pasted across the entire industry. And it's never that it's that absolute across the board. It's some blend of something in the middle.
Totally. And we also know that therapists, counseling, psychiatrists, like they're overloaded. And one of the problems is that sometimes the wait lists are so long that when someone needs immediate attention and they can't be seen for 6 months, like what is that person supposed to do? And so there is this gap of healthcare and the availability that really, really needs to be figured out, especially post-pandemic. Like we are in this mental health crisis and there's just not enough resources, and so sometimes things don't happen how we hope that they would.
Can you get momentum on your own?
Absolutely.
So maybe let's go there for a minute. Let's talk about some of the practical ways to get some momentum on our own.
Okay. And I want to be clear that when I talk about this, I am not referring to like if you have PTSD or severe trauma or a clinical diagnosis mental illness where you need support, right?
This is like, those are the outlier cases. They're not the most common. We're talking about the middle 80% of cases.
You're going through grief.
Yes, this is what we all deal. They call it normal life problems, and then the associated emotions that happen, right? No less traumatic, no less suffering than the next person, you know, but trauma itself, suffering itself in the vast majority of it. Let's be okay.
What is interesting though is that me and you could have the same experience, normal experience, and I could have PTSD or trauma from it and you couldn't. So based off of how you react and how the reaction came up for you and based off of life experiences, we can all share the same experience and have totally different reactions from it also. But here's what I would say. If you find yourself, like you are stuck, you're in the grief, you're like, I don't know who I am anymore and I don't know how to move forward. How do I find myself again?
Can I give you a quick example so that you can talk right to one person?
Okay, yeah,
How about
that?
Okay, because this is a normal, I think, not so normal, but difficult situation, very tragic situation that our kind of crew here at HQ went through. One of our account managers on our media company side, Burn Media, and who was formerly my nanny, her name is Bailey, and her husband passed away at 34 unexpectedly from a genetic genetic mutation. And just one night he was here, next night he was gone, right? And Bailey, who is open about this, so she wouldn't mind me talking about it, you know, she's clearly in those stages of like, what? Like, it's been a little bit over a year now. we've all been there for her as much as we can. She doesn't have parental support on either side, unfortunately. No siblings. So it's really just her and her friends. So I think if you were to speak to Bailey, what type of practical advice could you give her to get some momentum going in the right direction to maybe stave off, those waves sitting and, keep them flowing? That's the expectation. It's not that it ever goes away, or that, we always want to remember Mike for all the great things he did and was going to do, and the light that he shed on our lives. And we're always going to remember that wave when it comes up, and we're always going to think about him in that happy light. How do we get that water to stop sitting? Or is it a time thing? Is it a strategy thing? Is it a little bit of both?
Yeah. Bailey, first of all, I'm so sorry. This is absolutely devastating. And of course you feel devastated, and like the water is sitting and trying to come up for air, trying to figure out what to do is, like, in my opinion, one of the bravest things that you can do as a human, of asking the question, how do I move forward after the hardest thing that could ever happen to me has now happened? I think at first we want to fix it, right? We want to fix it, and we don't want the people we love to feel the pain, but the reality is that the pain is going to be there, because that's the reality of grief. Something that I often hear, and that many people hear, is that time heals all wounds, and I don't believe that to be true.
I also think that's BS.
Yeah, it is BS. It sounds good, right? But I'm sure Bailey feels that how could time is not going to bring back Mike. Time is not going to fix my broken heart. Why? Well, because time doesn't erase love. And as long as we have love, we're going to have grief. Grief is the price that we pay for love. And so with Bailey, I and anyone in a situation like this, is the first thing is that, one, I am so deeply sorry. I know that you want to fix it right away. But for me, the very best thing that you can start doing is taking care of yourself, maybe in a way that you never have before. So here's what I mean. What we know, like especially the first year and a half, when you go through something really tragic, a lot of our needs fall away. We aren't hungry, so we kind of stop eating. It's really hard to sleep, so we stop sleeping. We get out of whack on our schedule, and so then we're kind of like zombies through the day on top of our grief, and we're not getting any of just like the practical, tangible things that we need, because our nervous system is so shot that we feel like we don't even have the capacity to do that. Here's something that I think is super cool about routine, is that what we know about grief is that grief needs routine. Why? Because when something unexpected happens to you, it throws everything off, and everything feels really scary in the world. You don't know if the next bad thing is going to happen or when it's going to happen. So you might be feeling like you're always constantly bracing for impact. Your shoulders are tight, your jaw's clenched, you feel sick in your stomach. Like, when is the next shoe going to drop? When we can create a routine for ourselves every day that gives us an expectation on what we can expect, it can kind of help us feel like we have a little bit more control over what's going on in our lives. And it can put us in these habits and patterns that help us get out of bed in the morning. So the first thing is establish a routine. And it might sound so simple, but your daily routine right now and forever, honestly, is your lifesaver. So what does it look like? What time are you getting out of bed in the morning? What are you doing when your feet hit the floor? Does this look like a mantra that you're telling yourself? Are you listening to a certain type of meditation or podcast? Are you brushing your teeth first? What are you eating for breakfast? Like, I want you to get really specific so that the days that are hard and you're like, I have no mental capacity or energy to figure out any of this out, it's already a routine for you. It's written out and you don't have to make any decisions, but you are taking care of yourself. The next thing I would tell you, which my own therapist told me for many years, and it's going to sound, again, so simple, is we need humor. You need a laugh. And that's like the opposite thing that you want to do, right? When life sucks. I remember after we had our pregnancy loss, one of the things that my therapist made me do every day was watch a show or a comedy sketch that made me actually laugh. And so that was part of my healing routine. I created a healing routine for myself, and that was part of the routine I did every day. I did something to make me laugh. So we got to start with the basics of let's get you taking care of yourself again. And as we can move through that, then we can start adding other things in and asking ourselves the question of, this is why I created my process called clarity mapping, but really figuring out what is my intention for my life now that things are different. Getting to that answer can be so hard because it means we have to let go of our expectations. It means that we have to move forward from what was to what is in the reality, going back to the acknowledgement. But what is your intention for your life right now? And then what are things that we can do to help bring that to life? And based off of that answer then is where you can kind of start jump-starting to do things like, oh my gosh, I felt some joy today because I did this thing, or oh my gosh, I'm making progress actually for the first time in a year in this thing. I never thought I would feel this way again, but starting to become very mindful of these moments, even if they're small, where we start having hope or we start thinking different thoughts that are replacing really negative ones that we've had for a long time, is like an essential part of not only the survival, but of moving forward.
Well, I hope that this is momentum for at least someone out there. I know there's thousands of people listening right now. Thank you guys for being here and tuning in. We all go through this stuff, and it's, sometimes hard to talk about or listen to even because it reminds you of tragedy in your life. And, so often we've been talking about this entire podcast, we run from it rather than lean into it. And so hopefully you are getting some momentum, you're experiencing some momentum. I know for me, when I was just getting started in business, I would listen to everything that Tony Robbins had to say because that was the person that had the answers for me at that stage in my life. And I hope that Ashley is that for any of you out there that are going through it, right? Whatever it may be, each of your mountain, your own mountain is steep as the next person's, no matter how you define suffering or you define trauma. These are real words that are a part of the human experience, and to live is to suffer, and it's important to find the meaning. So hopefully this is some momentum for you. The Healing Her podcast is also available on Apple Podcast for you guys to go check out. Talk about that for a moment.
So I love doing the Healing Her podcast because we have so strong of a community on Instagram, but you can only go so deep on Instagram. So I created the Healing Her podcast where we could really have tangible, dive deeper conversations on these type of topics. They're not all this deep into grief. There's some that will make you laugh. But
I like to go deep.
We like to go deep. I mean, deep in the grief, right? Like heavy. They're not all heavy.
Yeah.
But really helping you get the tools and the language and the processes to help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be. We have cool guests on it. But it's really become something that I created that I wish I would have had 7 years ago. So it's been a fun project to work on.
Yeah, they said the best businesses are the ones that scratch the owner's itch.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So Born to Shine came out in 2019. I am here with the workbook Clarity Mapping, which is what you were talking about. That's the workbook to go along with that. That dropped in 2022. So lots of material out there for people to continue to follow you. Your Instagram handle is Ashley LeMieux?
Ashley K. LeMieux.
Ashley K. LeMieux. Okay, got
Ashley LeMieux was taken, so I had to throw in my middle initial, which,
I get it. I have Devin R. Klein on mine.
I hate it.
It's you. It's our unique identity. This has been so great to be able to get to talk to you and for you to share your story and also your experiences and your knowledge that stemmed from your story. So thank you for being here and talking to us about grief and suffering and pretty deep topics. And we had a few laughs throughout the podcast as well. So any last words of wisdom or advice that you might want to leave with the Burn Boot Camp audience today?
Yeah, just no matter where you are right now, I want you to always know that you're not too late, you're not too far behind, you're not too lost, your story isn't over yet, and every single day you have the power to make a new decision, to take a new path that gets you to where you want to be.
You heard it, everybody. All right, thanks, Ashley.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you. 2 claps on 2. 1, 2.